What's up, guys? Tommy Bowyer here from Movie Rewind, and welcome back to Unboxing the Controversy. Today we will be looking at Transformers, and I'm joined by Matthew Trollerton. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
Yeah.
As already stated, welcome to Unboxing the Controversy, a series in which we look at some very controversial films which people have lots of different opinions about. And I think Matthew will be very interested in the films we're going to be talking about today, because we're going to be talking about the Transformers films, which, let's face it, are a very controversial set of films. Now, I thought about doing just one specific Transformers film. However, I felt as a lot of the Transformers films are basically the same thing. We'd just do a discussion on the Transformers series, the film franchise
Yeah,
as a
the
whole.
same. Yes, it's a film franchise which could say has caused controversy with the critics, not so much to be honest, apart from the last one, with the audience, which is why they kept making more, because the audience kept watching it and kept buying tickets, and they kept making billions and billions until the fifth one, where that pissed everyone off. Until they didn't make any more money.
Yeah.
We saw all the Transformers films before the fifth one was making over $1 billion at the box office. When The Last Night came out in 2016?
17? I think it was 2017.
17, yes. When it
I
came
think
out
it
in
was
2017
2017.
and failed to and made around $600 million at the box office, Hasbro and Paramount decided just to kill off the Bayformers franchise altogether. But that's a topic for another day, and I'm sure we'll discuss it one day. But we're going to talk about the mark that the film franchise left behind.
Yes. Now, obviously, I'm going to be honest with you straight off the bat. I'm not a massive big fan of the Transformers films. I didn't watch Transformers when I was a kid, so my opinion on Transformers is very different to Matthew's, as well as numerous people who grew up with Transformers and their films. So, in terms of the original Transformers film, the one directed by Michael Bay, which started it all,
It was a
I
good
can watch
movie.
this film. Yeah, I can watch this film and enjoy it for what it is, because it's not that bad. It's not great, in my personal opinion. It's not great, but it's not that bad. It's a fun action movie. And I don't know about you, but sometimes you need films which are just a bit of fun. They're a bit action. They've got a bit of humor in there, and not that bad. So, do you like the? I think you like the
Yes, I
first
like the first
Transformers
one. It
film.
was it was a good. Everyone who grew up on Transformers was seeing that for the first time was quite a it was quite an experience. We saw, in terms of cinematic experience, we saw, well, the Transformers franchise, especially the first one, bring leaps in CGI technology, like not quite through massive bounds like we saw in like probably the Matrix, like the leap that sort of made for CG movies, but in terms of like seeing actual, just the blends of how they were able to get like the robots in, and the blend of all that CG into the real world, into somewhat what could be classed as believable, even though we all know giant robots fighting aren't real. But in terms of the CG experience, cinematic experience, it was, well, a big moment, especially like when you're young or you were a massive fan of Transformers growing up, seeing
Mm.
just the Transformers arrive for the first time and seeing like Optimus Prime appear and transform for the first time, like in immense detail. Like I can remember just seeing Optimus Prime transform, like the detail, all the little bits moving on him. Yeah, it was quite a cinematic experience, and one that was enjoyable. Now looking back at it, we might say it might not have the best story, but it was certainly one that was enjoyable.
Oh yeah, I don't think you can argue that. I mean, I'm not a Transformers fan, but I can see for a Transformers fan watching this, especially a young one, like
Hmm.
who's grown up with like the TV shows and the toys and things like that, it would probably be quite an experience just to see it on the big screen. It's always a good thing to see your childhood heroes on the big screen for the first time. And as you said, in terms of CGI, it's really actually strong CGI. I was surprised when I've seen this film how well the CGI still
For
holds up really
2007.
well. Yeah, and it's a lot better than some modern movies
Yeah.
which use CGI, but really put a lot of work into that. And I know a lot of people don't like Michael Bay. He's probably one of the most controversial film directors in the world,
Yeah.
but you can tell he put quite a lot of effort into this film. He weren't just like putting half effort in. There was certainly he was trying with this film, and I think it paid off. It's, as I said, it's an enjoyable film that you can rewatch and you feel happy during the end because it's just a fun film, and
Yeah.
sometimes you need fun films.
And when the first Transformers was made, like it was originally just planned as just that's it. That's Transformers. Like there was no plan until the money came in for there to be a sequel. Like it was
Mm,
just designed just to be a standalone movie which sold toys. Because
mm.
well, of course, Transformers IP being sold, owned by Hasbro, they want to sell. Hasbro wants to sell toys. It's their business model.
Yeah. But I feel with this film, the main goal weren't to make money or make toys. It was more about telling, putting Transformers on the big screen and telling a story. I get
Yeah,
the sense with Transformers, they put a lot more effort into that than they did into like trying to make toys and things like that. Maybe that's because, as you said, I don't think they expected this film to make the amount of money that it did. I think they thought it might
yeah,
make a bit of money. However, it's not going to be like a smash hit at the box office. So when it turned out to be, then of course more people, more executives start looking at it and saying, "Oh, we
sequel,
could be sitting on a gold
sequel.
mine." Yeah, and that's one of the main problems. I enjoy Transformers as a film because it was made to make money. Obviously all films are made to make money, but it weren't made primarily just to sell toys or just cash in on loads of cinema tickets. It was made to tell a story and to bring Transformers to the big screen, and I think that they did a good job with that.
Yeah, which is when we get into where the franchise became controversial. The first one,
Mm.
no controversy with that one. Like, yeah, of
No.
course, critics were saying weren't like praising it dramatically, but weren't bashing it like they would in the third ones. They will give them fairly even average to good, moderate to good reviews of the movie critically. Um, of course, there's massive discrepancy between the audience and what the critics think, but which we certainly will get into with the next one, which was
Yeah.
Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, which 2009 release had a lot of problems. It was filmed during the writers' strike. So reading into
Yeah.
this, the 2009 Transformers movie, they portions of the story they were making up on the spot on the set. Like
Yeah.
the actors were like asked to write things like traveling to the set the day before or during, just improvising. Like they didn't really have much of a story at all. Um, you could sort of blame it for the writers' strike. Obviously, no writers actually creating a coherent narrative is a big issue. But in terms of what the film was going for, which was, I suppose you could say it was going for, I don't think the film itself didn't even know what it was going for with just what they tried putting in. But of course, it had a lot of good moments in terms of what people actually want from Transformers film, which is robot action. Of course, there was good fights, CG fights between Optimus Prime and Megatron, like midway through the movie, which then they killed Optimus Prime. But then you're like, oh yeah, like they sort of showed Optimus Prime later in the trailers, like yeah, because they're gonna kill him off, yeah.
Yeah.
At the time, I was like being like nine, or was I eight? No, nine. At the time, seeing Optimus Prime die, I'm like, ah. But to any other person,
Yeah.
of any other viewer, he had the bit. They were like, really, he's they killed Optimus Prime, yeah, because it's not like he's coming back. But yeah.
Yeah. I
So,
think the
what were your
main
thoughts of this movie?
I think it's an incoherent mess.
Yeah,
There's no there's the problem is, as you said, they improvised a lot of scenes on the spot and just like the day before, and I think that shows on screen
Yeah.
because the storylines seem to be all over the place. There's so many subplots in this film. Like they're trying to focus on so many characters, and it's just not working. You know what the first Transformers film had. It followed like a specific character and
Yeah.
his journey, and then the with this film, it doesn't really know what it's doing. It's kind of all over the place. I personally think this film has a lot of disposable characters in it, which you could just get rid of and probably make the
Yeah.
film better. I think the main character, I think his name's Sam. Is it Sam,
Sam
the main
Witwicky,
character?
yeah.
Is it? Yeah. He's a college roommate. You know, they could have just got rid of him, and the film might have been better than it was
There's a lot of
because
things they could
it's
have
just
got
so
rid of, and the film would have been the same story wise.
yeah. Yeah, but I don't know. This film just feels like a complete mess. No real story to it. By this point, I felt this film was not exactly just there to make money. I feel like they had an idea of what they wanted to do, but because of the circumstances in when it was made, you know, with the writers' strike and during all that, that's what hurt this film. I mean, the CGI is still brilliant.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
you
you
can't
can't
argue.
the production value in terms of CGI because well, it was a writer's strike, not a Michael Bay camera CG strike.
And the fight scenes are good.
Yeah,
The main
when
gripe I have
when
is
they actually do get to the robot on robot fight scenes, they are enjoyable. But
yeah.
the problem is, like as we get into future Transformers films, is that the things people want to see about Transformers become less and less, where they feel it more guff and subplots and less about robots fighting.
I think that the gripe I have with the fight scenes is fight scenes are great, but you need a setup.
Yeah,
You know, you need if you're going to have a fight scene, then you need both the heroes and the villains to have motives, and they've reached such a point that the only way they can get out of it is by fighting.
yeah.
That's what makes a good fight scene because you know what's at stake, and they've built it up over the course of the
And
film so that
you've got
you
to have
get fights.
a proper connection and feel a threat from the villain. From the villain in
Yeah,
this, it wasn't Megatron, it was the Fallen, which is meant to be Megatron's master back in the day, which we don't know other than that, and used to be on Earth many years ago. In the past, there was Transformers on Earth, which would later become a reoccurring thing of different points of history of Transformers, which the first one didn't do,
yeah,
which is why it worked out. Apart from well, Allspark crashing years ago on, but in terms of like the Transformers being like in a interfering in dramatic historical events would later
yeah.
follow down the line.
I
But the
felt that was
villain
a
was well, the villain was just a generic villain who just said, "I am the bad guy. I'm going to destroy shit because I'm the bad guy."
oh, I think the main problem with the villain was, in my opinion, which is because you have to think this is a sequel to the first film. So if this main villain is like the mastermind behind all of this, where was he during the first film? You know, was he just having a cup of tea like on Mars, just saying, "Yeah, well, I'll get back to it." Like,
Yeah,
where was he? If he was in charge, like where? If you're gonna bring in a new villain, that is great, but you got to explain where he's been. You can't just say, "Well, he just weren't there. Now he is." That just
yeah.
doesn't
But
make
the
sense.
problem
Unless you
is though,
said,
then you have also you're meant to have Megatron, who's meant to be a villain, but then he's just becomes Fallen's bitch, and not really
yeah,
scary at all. Whereas in the first one, I felt like Megatron. Yeah, okay, Megatron in the first one, he's a serious threat. Like the Transformers are going
yeah,
to struggle to fight him. Optimus Prime's well, as we saw in the first one, like the only way they could defeat Megatron was like with the Allspark energy and all that stuff, and you could tell he posed an actual threat and
yeah, because they
was a
set it
villain.
up. They
Whereas in
you
the
got to
second
admit,
one, he's just a weak bitch who's just there to say, "I am Megatron, buy my toy."
when in the first film they set him up as this like big villain who's
Yeah,
going to pose a massive threat to the Transformers, and then when you get to this film, it's like he's no
and they
longer really
resurrected
a
him,
threat.
which we'll get into Megatron's resurrections later down.
And I actually think because they defeated him in the first film, bringing him back in this film so soon kind of lessened his
Don't worry, they
impact
kill him
because
again.
well, no, it just felt like, well, they defeated him once, so they can obviously defeat him again. Plus, I have a small gripe. I suppose as a Transformers fan, you could help. You know that like the main thing about this is they have a piece of the Allspark cube, don't
Yeah,
they? And when because he's touched that piece, that means he's got all these crazy thoughts and everything. But during the first film's finale, when he
yeah.
was
I
running
know he's
around with
holding
that
the entire thing.
what the hell? He didn't get any of that, and he was holding the whole thing.
Shush.
So that's the problem. This film just feels
I
like
thought.
it didn't understand the first film, or it weren't following on from it. I know that's a lot to do with the
Well, at
writing.
least they had more of coherent of understanding the previous films, which later down the line they don't. So,
True.
thoughts of Revenge of the Fallen was, meh.
It was.
Good,
It was in
some good
my.
action moments which I enjoyed, but meh.
It's the worst Transformers film in my opinion. I don't like this
I don't know.
film.
It's probably worst or second worst. One of them.
Mm, I just don't like this film.
Which brings us into the film that I actually do like. So, in terms
Right.
of films I could hand on my heart say I thoroughly love and enjoyed was probably the first one, and this one, which is Transformers: Dark of the Moon, which I thought was much better than Revenge of the Fallen because they actually had a story.
Yeah, that always helps. I have to say.
And well, this film I actually really I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a kick-ass film at the time, and I can still go back and watch it and enjoy it for what it is. It's just an enjoyable film with somewhat of a story which I made sense in my mind, but might not be the most plot heavy or thick. But I thought it was an enjoyable film. Released in 2011, it made quite a lot of money. It was the big blockbuster of the summer. I remember going all the way to see it, and I loved it. What about your initial thoughts of this film?
Well, I remember trailers for this film. I didn't actually see it in cinemas, but by the trailers, it always looked epic
Well,
in
yeah, that's
terms
what
of like the
blockbuster
action
trailers are meant
scenes
to
and
do.
stuff like that. And I have to say, the main thing you're looking for in a third film in a series is for it to raise the stakes. I mean, technically, if the
This
Transformers were having a trilogy, this would be the final chapter in the
this did
trilogy. I
raise the
mean,
stakes in cinema history. Yeah, you might not realize this of a terrible plot trope which was to follow from this movie of having magic beamy in the sky thing that we need to defeat.
wow, was this one of the first films to do that?
Yes.
Oh, that's used all the time now. In most films, that's used.
Yep.
Well, I actually enjoy this film. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've rewatched it. I've seen it probably 2 or 3 times, and especially the third time I saw it, I was surprised by how much I was enjoyed it because, especially the final action scene,
Oh yeah,
it honestly
the
feels
third act was good.
like
We got
this
into
is
what
the
we
biggest
actually
challenge
wanted.
that Transformers have
Yeah.
faced. The first film and then the second film I felt didn't raise the stakes in terms of the threat. In the third film, I felt like that stake was like really high,
Yeah.
and I enjoy this film. I think the characters are a lot better. They focus on Sam a lot more than they did in the second film. Of course, Megan Fox doesn't appear in this film because she
For issues between
argument.
Michael Bay and Steven Spielberg actually fired her.
Yeah, but I think I don't know the actress's name, but the one they get to
Holly
replace
thingy
Megan
something.
Fox in this is not actually that bad. I think she's one of the more developed female characters in Transformers films, which is saying something. And I think that the action is done really well. I this is a good conclusion to the Transformers
What should have been
trilogy. Unfortunately, Transformers
money.
weren't just a trilogy, but but this feels like it feels like the conclusion they should have had. They should have just left it at this film
Yeah.
and then focused on other things.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I just feel
No, I thought
if it
this would have been a
ended with
good
this
conclusion
film,
to the trilogy, even if we just
yeah,
forget about the second one. But yeah, they tried to make a decent movie. Of course, it has a lot of Bay issues and mistakes that we can talk about in films. I still think there's possibly a bit too much human guff again. Um,
Mhm.
which is not as bad as it was in the second one or ones to come, but and well, like I said, the third act was proper good because it was, apart from in terms of Transformers action, we didn't get too much of it. So we had a little fight scene at the start. The highway chase scene, like halfway through the film, I thought was really well done with the choreography of the cars, and that was an
Yeah.
enjoyable action sequence. Then we got a bit of human guff, and yeah, the midpoint's probably a bit. But then we get into the
But don't
third
you?
act when the Transformers return to fight the Decepticons, which is what we wanted all along. Is Transformers kicking the shit out of Decepticons, which is yeah.
But don't you think having less action or saving the action until the end, or actually makes you enjoy the action more?
I
Because with
suppose,
the
but
second
there's
one,
got to be a good
second
build up.
one there with the second one there was a lot of action in it,
Yeah,
but I felt
that was
the
just
second one
nonsense
there's
action.
there's too much
Yeah,
action. With this, as you said, they set up the stakes well in terms of the third act. With the invasion and all the Transformers being there to fight it off. They've set up the stakes so you enjoy the action
yeah,
more because it feels like this is like a threat and they need to destroy it. So I think if you considered that this was just a Transformers trilogy instead of five
yeah,
films, you'd have two good films and then one bad film in between.
yeah.
So it's not a bad trilogy.
Oh yeah,
I think
definitely.
this rounds it off really well. But as we both know, Matthew, they didn't end.
Money. It was
They
meant to be.
didn't
It
end
was
the
meant to
films
be the
here.
end. It was meant to be the end. But
But
then,
money
but
has
then
good.
Paramount,
But money.
then Paramount rings up Michael Bay. Hey, do you want to do another Transformers? Michael Bay was like, no. Would double the paycheck? Right. I think I've saw someone
Yeah,
they
I,
paid
I
him.
also the last point on
They paid him
the last
crazy
point on
money
the
to do
third
it.
film is I feel that this was the last Transformers film in which Michael Bay actually cared
Yeah.
about making it. I
Oh yeah,
think
definitely.
after this, he was there for the money and not much else.
See, the film had some potential. It was a soft reboot of the Transformers franchise. Well, it wasn't really a reboot.
Yeah,
It was a continuation, but it was made. But it sort of felt like a reboot because they redesigned all the Transformers. They gave Optimus Prime a new design to sell toys. Yeah,
and they brought in Mark Wahlberg, didn't they, as the
I
main
think I found
character?
Transformer.
Yeah, because Shia LaBeouf, they didn't invite Shia LaBeouf back,
No,
and his life's been going a bit
I'm pretty
downhill.
sure like 2014 was when Shia LaBeouf had his massive breakdown of just do it
I can't
and
remember the exact
paper
year,
bags
but
on his head.
they didn't go with him. Let's
No,
just leave it at that. They didn't go with him. So, Age of Extinction is
2014 release.
yeah.
It was an alright
There was a lot of
film.
hype. There was a lot of hype for this film. And from what I remember, especially you were very excited because
Of
you
course I
thought
was.
this could be this could be like a really good film. No offense,
Well,
you
yeah,
thought
I
this was
thought
going to
it
be a
could
really
be.
good film. Yeah. And
Like it wasn't
looking back at it,
terrible. It wasn't like bad, but it wasn't
no,
good. Especially as a Transformers fan, I was like, I sort of
it
felt
felt like
like
a film.
they sort of like disrespected the Transformers brand by saying, "Oh yeah, the humans have made their own Transformers and they're going to invade a city now." Instead of, "Okay, I want actual Transformers lore. I want to explore the Decepticons. I want to explore the Autobots. I want." Nope. It turns out we're just gonna have a human-made threat, and Megatron's gonna turn up again.
Yeah, I've heard some people say that they wished Age of Extinction weren't set on Earth. It was actually, set. It had nothing to do with Earth whatsoever.
Yeah.
I've heard some people
Too
say
much
that.
human, and like we talked about like the human component, like human guff of stuff that we just didn't really care about. This is where they ramped up very hard.
Oh yeah, a lot of focus on the human characters, and that's not bad if the human characters are two things: relatable and interesting.
Yeah,
These ones aren't. They're. I wouldn't say they're very relatable. They're basically stereotypes,
and they had
and
the storylines as well. Sort of doing what they sort of did make sense, but they were like combining trying to do three stories at once, which just
Yeah.
made things messy. So you had what we think is the main villain, Lockdown, which is he's not meant to be a Decepticon or an Autobot. He's a bounty hunter, just here to collect Optimus Prime for the creators. Yet he's helping hunt down other Autobots, which we don't know why he's doing that, apart from just to get the help of the humans, which they didn't do anything anyway. And the humans are wanting something called the Seed. This is where we also found out the Transformers were there from the dinosaurs as well.
Yeah. The
Because
Transformers have been
Mark's
there a
in
long
time
time,
for
haven't
the Dinobots, which we'll get to at the end, which
they?
pissed me off.
Oh.
Yeah, so we had
Yep.
Lockdown, who was just there to hunt
About that.
Optimus Prime, just to bring him back. But then that's not really much of a big stakes villain. It's just if they're doing trying to do a small scale movie, then yes, I could sort of see. But of course, they didn't want small scale of just
No.
this story of the bounty hunter versus Optimus Prime. They wanted big action sequences, so we had humans make their own Transformers, which
Yeah.
I am making their own Transformers material, and how they transformed was pissed everyone off. I thought was complete disrespect to Transformers. I don't know who the villain was meant to be. They had it so all these robots that the humans created were actually infected by Megatron, and Megatron had them build him a new body, and Megatron's back in a weird way.
I think the main problem I have with this film is he's using the same villain again.
Yeah.
It was by this fourth film that I got a bit sick of Megatron. You know, in the first film he was scary, and maybe if he missed out the second film and third film, then his like appearance in this film might feel more of a threat. It doesn't, because you've seen them defeat Megatron so many times, and because in the second film he came across as a bit of a bitch, you know, just working for someone higher than him. So you really don't feel like there's any actual threat there. I know this might not be your
Yeah.
opinion, but because of what happened in Revenge of the Fallen, I feel like the henchman is now the main villain of the film. I
Yeah.
know he was the main villain, but it just feels like a henchman because that's all I see him as now. Because in the
Yeah.
second film, they just made him the henchman. So it just feels like
And
they're battling the henchman.
in this movie, we didn't feel like, oh yes, there's the threat of the robots doing something, detonating the seed, which is this massive bomb in the city, and trying to get that out of here. Which you think, oh yeah, there's a threat of this rogue army. They're coming after this thing as another weird subplot. But then we see all that threat is wiped off, which I could somewhat say the thing that pissed everyone off and also made part of this very long movie enjoyable was the sequence of the Dinobot charge. When they finally introduced the Dinobots, the sequence where the Dinobots were charging through the city and arrive in the city to help the Autobots, I thought that was a good scene. I thought that was an enjoyable scene of the Dinobot charge. But then you realise, oh crap, this movie ends in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're like,
The only way, because
what? Have they? The Dinobots have arrived finally, but they're done. And then the Dinobots are so overpowered, like the Dinobots arrive and like, yeah.
I think I remember asking you in reference to the Dinobots. I said, "Why, why is these Dinobots appearing in the last 5 minutes? Why is that such a big issue to you?" And you turned to me and you said, "Let me put it this way: in your eyes, it's like Rhino appearing in the Amazing Spider-Man 2." And I was like, "I see what you mean. I see what you mean."
Yes.
I think the problem is that this film was marketed that the Dinobots were like a big
The
thing
massive.
in the film,
Yeah.
and then they appear in the last 5 minutes, and especially this is a pretty long film, isn't it? How
Yeah.
long is it?
It's like 2 hours, almost 3 hours.
Yeah, so you've sat through that entire film, and I know what it's like when you're sitting through a film waiting for the main thing that you're going to be there to turn up. Then it turns up, and you have a look at your watch, and you're like, they've screwed me over here. There's only 5 minutes left.
Given
This isn't
the the first 5 minutes, I think they're in the film for like 10, 15 minutes in tops, in terms of like portions of the movie where they're introduced. For the first 5 minutes where they had that brilliant sequence, I thought, yeah, this is quite enjoyable. Then, like, they weren't used much apart from, yeah, they're here, they're overpowered. jobs are good. And it's
Oh,
sort of
never
like
appearing.
It's sort of like the Justice League where they just bring Superman in because
Yeah,
yeah,
because he's overpowered
he's
and he can
overpowered.
defeat anything.
Then he can defeat anyone. That's the same with the Dinobots.
Yeah, I
So
feel like with
they
the main word I would use to, I'm gonna sum up this film in one word, actually two
not
words.
trash, but
Um,
not good.
actually, I can sum up this film in the phrase "no one cared" because I don't feel like anyone involved in making this
Well,
film really cared
no.
about it. I mean, Michael Bay clearly didn't really care about making this film. He was there for the money. He still put some effort in. You know, the effects are still
Oh yeah,
really strong. You
choreography of
can't
action
fault him
can
on
never
that.
be denied.
But it's very clear that in terms of being a director and putting together a clear story and an actually enjoyable film, you got the impression that he didn't really care. He was just like, yeah, fair enough. I'm still getting paid, whatever
Yeah.
happens. So, Transformers: The Age of Extinction is the film which it could have been good, and it could have been like a refresh of Transformers, which was needed at that time. However, I don't think it pulled off. It just came across as a weak film.
And this was again meant to be Michael Bay's last movie.
Yeah,
In the studio went,
yeah.
money? How
Like,
much?
yeah,
We'll
okay.
double it again. Count me in.
And he
So,
was like, yeah, you're the idiots, not me.
which brought us into the thing that killed the Bayformers franchise, The Last Night,
Can
which was set
can we
up.
just brief,
The setup, they had a lot of potential. The setup, the characters they were going to use were
can we
potentially
just go through
very
my
good.
reaction at the end of this film? Just go through my reaction. I sat there in the cinema and just went,
Hmm?
like, what was that? What was that? I think everyone had that. Just
Which
what?
which I really wanted to like this movie, and I did enjoy it more the second time, but it's still a movie I don't rewatch.
Yeah, but you had potential. You had Anthony Hopkins
You
in
had
your film.
Yes, you had Anthony
The-
Hopkins. You had Megatron, the design he should have had ages ago, voiced by Frank Welker. You had,
You
but they
had.
stuffed it
I
up.
think. I mean,
And
you
they
said
stuffed
there
up
was a
the
lot of.
Transformers law that they set up previously of, oh yes, Optimus Prime is going to meet his creators. But
I
then,
think
like,
what annoyed
they
me about
completely
this
shit
film
over the previous movies and Transformers law they've established in this movie.
I think what annoys me about this film is when I looked at the trailers and there was like a lot of fighting between Optimus Prime and Bumblebee, and Optimus Prime being evil and kind of possessed and
Yes,
stuff like.
this
And
was
I
the
actually
point
thought,
of cinema where it was cool for, you know, heroes fighting
yeah,
heroes.
yeah, this was this came out a year after Civil War, Batman vs Superman, so of course it was a big thing at that time. But I actually thought, wow, I could actually get into that. Optimus Prime, who everyone's always like, yeah, he's the hero, turning evil or being possessed. I thought they could do something with that. They could make that work. But then when you see when he's possessed in this film
And why
and
and
how
how.
easily they turn him good again, it just makes you think, what?
What's the point of that?
What was that? That weren't worth it.
Yes, so Optimus Prime travels all the way to Cybertron because that's where the creators were, even though we established the Transformers was created by the Allspark and all that, but fuck all that.
That's where the toy potential is
They were
available.
actually made by this weird little witch fairy thing, which is meant to be the creator of the God knows what they're going for. And she's like, "Oh, it turns out I've been on Cybertron all this time." And they tried to set up, and I thought, okay, they could be doing what they've done from like the Transformers Prime series, some of the comic books, and they're like, "Oh yeah, they're setting up. Oh yes, that Earth is actually Unicron, and they're going to do Cybertron's actually Ultra Primus." And I thought, "Oh, are they actually going to do that?" No, but they're going to say Earth is Unicron anyway, and have massive horns coming out of the Earth. Like, no.
I got the idea in this film. There's a little bit of universe setup in
Yes,
terms of.
this
I
film was
feel
meant
like
to launch the cinematic universe of the Transformers. That's
yeah,
how it was planned by the studio.
because once again, this came out as at a time when all studios wanted to have a cinematic universe.
Yeah,
So The Last Night really does try to do that, and it feels like a film, much like Independence Day:
yeah.
Resurrection, when they're making a film to set up a cinematic universe. They don't care what the film
Yeah, they
is.
were
They're
trying to
just
set up.
setting up more.
Yeah, they were trying to set up the
Yeah,
then planned Bumblebee spin-off movie, which was meant to be set in the Bayformers franchise. Later, that doesn't quite work out. They used the Bumblebee as a reboot
yeah,
later on because of the repercussions from this film. So Bumblebee was meant to be in the Bayformers, but then this film flopped, so they rebooted in Bumblebee, which
yeah.
we might slightly touch on in a bit. Which
Slightly touched on.
Tommy enjoyed Bumblebee
Yeah.
because it wasn't Bayformers.
The problem, the main problem I have with The Last Night is it's a film which, much like Age of Extinction, maybe even more so, no one cared about making. It was just there to make money, sell toys, and build up a cinematic universe. That was its three main
Yeah,
purposes, and it failed on two of those counts. I
it
believe it
failed in all
sold a
of
lot
them.
of toys, but it oh, did it not sell a lot of toys? Oh, I
Well,
didn't. I
the
didn't know.
reason why it was scrapped was because of money, because it didn't make much money.
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong.
I know
Don't get me
it's a lot of
wrong.
money.
It still made double its budget, and marketing and toys would have made a lot more money. Don't get me wrong. It's not like the film made the studio loss.
Nothing.
It's just it didn't make the studio the massive amount the Transformers meant to. So they just
And
like
a lot of fans really disliked this film.
yeah,
I feel like a lot of fans liked Michael Bay and thought he made good films, and Transformers was still making good films. And by the fifth film, those people were saying, okay, enough's enough. You're not making these for us anymore. You're making these for money. You don't care about the Transformers characters. You know, and as you said, they're not reading the source material. They're not really trying to be faithful
yeah.
to it.
This movie was weird. It was the Transformers were also we gathered were in history of ancient Egyptians, the pyramids, then the moon landing, then the dinosaurs,
Yeah,
and now
and the
fucking
dinosaurs.
Merlin and Knights in the Round Table.
Yeah,
Somewhat,
Transformers have appeared a lot
somewhat
throughout
grounded
this.
in reality of the previous settings. Of yes, okay, with Dark Moon, I can believe. It's possible. That could make sense. But then it's like Merlin, magic staff, and dragons.
The most believable one is Transformers on the Moon.
Yeah,
Actually, that's the most believable one. And as you said, the Egyptians, yeah, you can buy that. Dinosaurs, okay, fair enough. And then Merlin is like, hang on a minute. You're really saying no one knew about Transformers, despite them appearing like four times
I thought the
already.
Knights of the Round
No
Table
one knew.
stuff and Merlin and the magic staff was just stupid. It was just a stupid idea.
Yeah,
It was just
it
stupid. It was
didn't
made no
add
sense. It was
anything to
ridiculous.
the film. It didn't add anything to the
No
film. It just felt like they were just trying to make it look cool.
magic,
It didn't work.
magic in this mythical setting wasn't magic. It was Transformers.
Yeah, but that's what they do with every film, isn't it? It's not magic, it's science, or it's not magic, it's alien
Then
technology.
Megatron's back in it
All
again.
films do that.
I thought the introduction of Megatron was stupid. A staff of great power. We will find the staff. Yeah, evil.
Yeah, I once again, I wish they'd stop using Megatron because he's not intimidating. You've seen this guy beaten so many times. You know,
I keep
what's
seeing
the
him get
point
beaten
of
up
having
again.
it? It's like Sideshow Bob from The Simpsons. You've seen him get beat so many times. What is the point of having him turn up again? Because he's never going to win.
No.
He's not a threat anymore. You know, if you look at if you watch the first Transformers film and then watch this film without watching the ones in between, you would say, "Oh my god, what did they do to Megatron?"
Yeah, but
because he's no
the entire
longer
story even makes
intimidating.
sense, especially when you look back at previous films. Cybertron's coming to Earth for some reason, even though Cybertron was actually destroyed in a giant wormhole in the third one. But
What about the
yeah,
guy from the Pyramid, Fallen? Didn't he know about that? Or here, I don't know. Everyone seems kind of-
Cybertron was destroyed in the third one. Why? How come it can come back in this form? You literally see it get blended up. So how come it's back and able to come to Earth and crash into
It's
Earth?
back
Which
because of money.
I don't know why.
He's back because money wanted it back.
Because at least they explained it, like in the third one, they're bringing Cybertron to Earth to use basically
Yeah.
a slave force from Earth to rebuild Cybertron. Cybertron's destroyed. Why is it coming back to Earth? To merge with Earth? Why? What's that going to do? It's just going to crash into it and just bang it up even more. Like, it didn't make sense.
No, I this film just doesn't make sense, and you can't blame it on there being a writer's strike, or you have to blame it on the fact they didn't care about this film,
Yeah.
and people didn't care because the filmmakers didn't care about it. People didn't care about it either, and that's why when it was announced that Michael Bay would not be returning to do any more Transformers and they were gonna completely reboot the franchise, I was like, hallelujah! They're finally done with this. They're done with the same films. They want to make something different. And I think we'll touch on now Bumblebee, released
Yes.
last year.
Coming out of the Bay Formers franchise.
Yeah. And I think you saw it first, and then you
Yeah.
said to me, Tommy, have you seen Bumblebee? It's not that bad. And I was like,
I said
no,
I
I'm
thought
not
it was a
seeing
movie you
that.
would
I don't
enjoy
like Transformers. Yeah. And
because
then I
they
went
did
to
a
see
lot
it.
right.
I
They
saw it.
G1 Transformers.
Yeah. And then I saw it, and I was surprised by how much I enjoyed. I actually enjoyed this film more than I did the first one
Hmm.
because it felt like a proper film.
Yeah.
All the Michael Bay rubbish was gone. The action was good, the effects were still strong, and it actually had likable human
Yeah.
characters. For the one of the first times, the majority of the human characters I actually liked, and I found them interesting, and you could relate to some of them. So, what are your views on Bumblebee? Because I think it's
Different
actually a
from the
really
first one,
strong
but in
film.
a good way. Like it was initially like meant to be set in the Bay Formers franchise, but obviously they canned all that
Mm,
and made it its standalone reboot film, setting up the Transformers lore again in a more faithful adaptation of like when we saw the intro sequence of Cybertron. I thought that was good, where we saw not like strictly G1, 1980s comic like
mm,
style, but they've taken the designs from the 80s, brought into more modern 3D CG. Reminded me more of the Transformers War for Cybertron game game series, which was really good in terms of a story. Where they should have. That's where they should have gone ages ago, and it just reminded me of that in terms of like the faithful adaptations from the Cybertron, and it's like seeing like classic designs at the start. Everyone was like praising it and going crazy for the robot designs, just starting off so well.
yeah.
And like
I,
everyone was saying we want a movie on that as well.
mm,
But yeah, Bumblebee was a solid film. It was. I don't know how they're going to establish like Transformers films going forward, but that remains to be seen. But as a standalone movie, I thought yeah, it was pretty good.
I think it's pretty easy to establish it because obviously they had a scene at the end with
Yeah,
Optimus Prime and Bumblebee. But I think the main thing I like about Bumblebee is that actually it focuses on just one Transformer. Like I know the other Transformers films focus on multiple ones. I liked that this film was a bit more simplistic and back to basics in the fact that there was just one you could focus on, and he was the hero and
yeah.
he was against villains, and the human characters actually felt like they played a part.
And there was
That
no clutter. It was a very coherent, straightforward. Not
yeah,
There's not this thing where there
it
has to
weren't
be massive stakes.
it weren't trying to be massive. It was a bit quieter, a
Yeah,
bit more just light-hearted. The threat was more about the characters involved than like a world threat, which
yeah.
I actually liked because you still felt there was a threat there, if not if it even though it weren't a world threat. So if Bumblebee is the sign of things to come for the
Yeah.
Transformers
Oh,
franchise,
there's a sequel plan in the
yeah,
works. You might like this. I don't know. You might not. The sequel to the Bumblebee movie is apparently going to be like a Optimus Prime Bumblebee buddy type movie.
see that could work.
Yeah.
That could
Not like
work.
big like Transformers Invasion Fleet and all that. It's just Optimus Prime Bumblebee movie.
And that builds on the universe as well.
Yeah.
If that,
And that
and also
also
the last thing I'm going to say about Bumblebee is I liked that this film wasn't directed by Michael Bay
yeah
for the simple reason I felt
Travis
like you've
Knight.
got a different style, a different direction, and that's always fresh to see. And I think that it made it feel like a reboot. The fact that Michael Bay hadn't directed this film, it just felt like it was nice to see a change in terms of the direction.
So, how can we conclude the Transformers franchise? Well, we're going to leave Bumblebee out of this because it's a separate franchise
Yeah.
technically. But let's round up the Bayformers franchise, which is dead. Um, had a lot of ups, but more downs. It was a
Yeah.
film franchise that had so much potential and had a lot of good things going for it. If they decided to just leave it as 3 films, it would have gone down in history as a decent film trilogy of one crap one in the middle, but one that I don't know could have ended on a pretty high note if they just left it at
Yeah.
number 3. But then they decided to ruin it, and that's
I
why
feel
it's probably
like,
gone down in history the
yeah.
way it has. If they left it at number 3, it would have gone down in history. Our opinions of it would probably be much higher.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that this, if it was a trilogy, it would be considered a decent trilogy, a really strong first film, a second film which is pretty weak. However, if you look at the context of it, you could actually say that, well, it's not entirely their fault because of the writers' strike and numerous problems.
Yeah,
And then a third film which really did round it off with high stakes and a good ending. But then, as usual, studios only think about money and decided to bring out a fourth and fifth film, which no one making it really cared about.
yeah,
And that is what ruins the Transformers franchise. It is those 2 extra films, the fourth and fifth film, which really bring this franchise down. As you said, Matthew, it could have been an all right trilogy. It could have been one that maybe I'd miss out the second film, but I could actually enjoy the first and
yeah,
third ones. Because the fourth and fifth film are there, it will never be ranked highly in my books.
yeah,
Just because the bad films in the franchise outweigh the good films, if you get
mm,
what I mean.
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I can agree with that. Even though the fourth one and the fifth one had some enjoyable moments, and the fifth one, I've never rewatched. I will admit, I went to cinemas to see it twice. I've not watched it since. Age of Extinction, I've rewatched a couple of times. Nothing major. The first and the second, and the first and the third one, I've rewatched the most times. The third one being the one I've watched the most. Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. I used to watch it a lot, but growing up, like going back to old films, I'm like, the first and the third one are the ones I'd rewatch. But yeah, apart from
Yeah.
that, it had a lot of good moments, big impact on my childhood. That, of course, I can never forget, like the magical moments and all the toys that I got for the movie. And writing out the
Yeah.
Argos catalogue after the year at Christmas time with all the Transformer movie toys. But moments like
Oh, the
that
Argos.
you can't get back.
I remember them going through the Argos catalog, picking out
But I
what
used to always
things
go to the
were.
Transformers page. I remember growing up, I used to go to Show and Tell, doing movie news on the Transformers franchise. Like, just magical moments like that was part of your childhood. Like, you can never forget and get back. But
No,
it's a shame it ended. The
no,
film franchise ended to how it did. But yeah,
no, you can never erase childhood memories like that. And as you said, you'll always enjoy the first and third films, and you'll always remember. I'm sure Transformers will always be a quite a big part of your life because obviously it's what you grew up with,
yeah.
which you can't take that away. I think Transformers is probably one of the more controversial
Oh yeah,
films we've
definitely.
discussed. I mean, obviously we have different opinions on the matter, but I was actually surprised doing this. And this is, I didn't expect this. Me and Matthew actually agree on quite a lot about
Hmm.
these films. I mean, I just assumed we'd have polar opposite views, but actually
I wouldn't say polar
we
opposite.
don't
It's
have.
like you see the film as trash. I see the film as meh,
Yeah,
I sort of cracked a smile, but of
yeah,
course the story fucked
but
up in the fifth one.
yeah, but even like the third film, which you enjoy, and I've actually looked back at it and said, well, actually, I quite enjoy that film. So
I
maybe
think
even
like
my
when
opinion might
when you
be
look back at the
changing.
original, even the second one, like when we look back at it, it's not as bad as I don't think the film franchise, the first 3, even I know the second one has got lots of problems, but it's not as bad as it's. I don't think it's as bad as people remember it to be, but at the same time, of course, we've talked about that. But it's a
Yeah,
franchise that, of course, will be remembered. even if it
Oh,
is
it
the
will
original
definitely
three.
not be forgotten. It will definitely not be forgotten. And you could say that's a good thing because sometimes you get forgettable franchises which, after they've stopped being made, no one really cares about. Quite a few DC
And
films, for
at
example.
least
Uh,
they did pull the plug
yeah, they did.
at the
They, I
wrong
mean, they.
at the time where the ship had already sunken, but at least they stopped it. Whereas you still got franchises such as Fast and Furious, the DCEU. They don't know what they're doing, but yeah,
But they didn't just stop it, did
no,
they? They rebooted it and they learnt from what they had done wrong before, and
which is
that's the
what
main thing studios
Transformers
should do.
may looks like it's doing now.
Yeah, and that's where franchises like Fast and Furious and the DCU are below in my rankings because they don't know when to stop. They just
No,
keep making films.
because they
So
keep making money.
anyway, I think this wraps up our discussion on Transformers.
Yes,
Thanks for watching, guys. I really do hope that you enjoyed this discussion. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe in order to receive great and maybe even improved quality content in the future. I'd like to thank Matthew for joining in on this discussion. I hope you enjoyed his ideas about it.
yes,
Can
it was a good
I?
discussion
Oh
with
yes,
you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I thought you were muted.
I just had to check my microphone just then because I thought I had been talking into the microphone with it being the wrong way all this time.
That would be. And I hope you guys still enjoy this Unboxing the Controversy series. This is the second one we have done. I hope we can do more in the
Yeah,
future, unboxing more controversial films and franchises. So, from me and Matthew, have a good evening, and we will see you in another one. See ya.
toodaloo, goodbye.